Sex. It is a wonderful gift from God, but it can become a terrible curse if it's not entered into responsibly. That's our topic next on the abortion controversy. Thank you for tuning in to part 9 of a 13-part series called The Abortion Controversy. I am Pastor Steve Wohlberg. I've been interviewing Dianne Wagner and Antionette. They work together for a ministry called Mafgia that is focusing on helping women and shedding light into the abortion tragedy. We've been dealing with a lot of subjects. We've been talking about women, babies, life, and death. And our focus in this segment is the sexual revolution, insights from history. So ladies, it's your time again to get us started. We've talked about this before, so we've got a lot of ground to cover. A couple thousands of years in this talk, so let's get started.
Well, you know, abortion has certainly been a part of history. And so what I'll start with, I guess, is just a breakdown first of ancient history. Okay. The first documented evidence of abortion was 1550 BC in Egypt. The Ebers Papyrus talked about types of abortion. Now it was the 11th century BC that the Assyrian Code, Code of Asherah, it was the earliest ban on abortion, and women would be put to death if they had an abortion without their husband's permission. It was okay if they had their husband's permission.
Well, you know, I never learned any of this in seminary. We never had a class on abortion in history. And
no,
so
I can't say I did. The ancient Persians, I thought was interesting. The priest and the doctors condemned it. They looked at it as cutting out the roots of life and the most important blessing of God. So that was fascinating.
For the Persians.
Now the Greeks have the dubious distinction of being the first to demand abortion. Any woman over the age of 40 was required to abort. And
really?
Their thinking was it was for the good of the state.
Now, isn't that similar to China? I mean, don't they have abortion laws where
a one-child rule.
Right. So if you have more than one child, then
and women
pressure
normally are targeted very much for abortion.
The pressure is tremendous to abort. But within the Roman Empire, initially, everybody had access to it, the rich, the poor, the slave, the free. But by the 3rd century, it was abortion became a crime. But of course, there was no punishment as long as the father of the child said it was okay. Now, you mentioned China. You know, ancient China, there was a controversy as far as pro and con, but the Confucians and the Buddhists and the majority of the people opposed it. They actually opposed abortion. One of their folklore in Chinese folklore is that 5,000 years ago the women would drink warm mercury to abort. So we know it was there. But that just grieved me, the thought of drinking warm mercury, to be that desperate, you know.
So it's been going on for a long, long time.
Yes, it has. And then our American history, if you're interested in that.
Yes,
I thought that was fascinating. I looked into that. And in the early years of our American history, it wasn't so much the laws as much as the community and the religious community and what they would do if a young lady found herself pregnant. The community would pressure that young man either to marry that woman and make it right or to provide financially for her. But sad to say, as America expanded, a lot of the support systems for these young ladies faded.
Right. So there were some good things about the Massachusetts Bay Colony. I've been reading about the history of Roger Williams and the morality and the strictness and some of the big mistakes that were made back then. But it sounds like that was a good
They recognized that. They
recognized
recognized
the men
that.
to own up and marry the women.
But as America did expand, you know, when a woman did find herself in trouble, there wasn't the support system available, and abortion did get a foothold. After that, because of that, the morality of America relaxed, and the social pressure became less of a deterrent. The social pressure, the religious community They were the ones in the very beginning that put the pressure on. Now, it was interesting to me that it was actually legislation that laws started being passed to against abortion at that time.
What
But
time? What time are we talking?
We're talking early 1800s, early and late 1700s.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that in the 1800s that the majority of physicians were against abortion.
Oh yeah, in fact I get to that. You know, it was fascinating because the legislation had an impact, but the moral relaxation had such an impact that people began to defend abortion in the public. You know, it became an issue that people started accepting. It was interesting to me because in the mid-1800s, two things that really made an impact on a rise in abortion was the explosion of prostitution. It became a big commercial industry, and of course, the abortion industry went on the rise. And the other one was the spiritualism. You know, in the mid-1800s, there was a spiritist revolution, and because of that, yeah, it had an impact on people. People would throw off their
the Fox sisters and
that period of time, and it had an impact. It was. I look at it as a sexual mini revolution then, because a lot of people threw off restraints, and that had an impact, of course, on the abortions in this country.
And they increased.
And they increased, actually. And what I found also was that the churches, they seemed to be crippled. Their voices, they didn't make a statement at this time, which I thought was very interesting and sad. They had lost their voice.
I think we're seeing that today, too, in a lot of ways.
We are,
the
unfortunately.
voices have been lost.
Yeah. And then, you know, we had the social pressure and the religious pressure, and then we had the laws. And then what I thought was very fascinating, that's when the American Medical Association stepped in. And they were the ones who pushed for very strict anti-abortion laws. They considered it immoral and dangerous, which I was really glad to see. You know,
dangerous to the life of the mother.
Yeah, it was a dangerous practice, but also immoral. And I liked that they looked at it that way. So, as sin and compromise would have it, by 1908 it became apparent that the women in particular, they wanted an aggressive, they wanted their abortion. They wanted their freedom for abortion. And the thinking of the day was the notion of compassion shifted from helping people do what was morally right to helping people do what seemed right.
For them.
That's exactly right. And a perfect example of this is Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger is known, you know, for coining the phrase birth control. And she is the one who believed that birth control would be the key to a sexual liberation or a sexual revolution.
And so where we stand now is, in 1973 in America, abortion was legalized. It was legalized through Roe v. Wade, and there was a companion case that went along with it, Doe v. Bolton. What Roe said is that abortion was going to be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy. In the first trimester, no restrictions. In the second trimester, no undue burdens could be placed on the woman to her having an abortion. In the third trimester, you could restrict abortion, but you had to include an exception for the health of the mother. Well, on the same day when Roe was decided, Doe v. Bolton, the Supreme Court also decided Doe v. Bolton. And what Doe said, it laid out a definition of health. The court decided that health was to encompass mental health, emotional health, socioeconomic health, any sort of kind of health that you could possibly conceive of could be fit into that definition. And so
having a good day is you're healthy if you're having a good day.
Right,
so
right.
Any kind of guilt would be contrary to health.
Right. And we've seen that the effect that these two decisions have opened the door to abortion on demand.
Now tell me, the 73, when Roe versus Wade, wasn't that really in the wake of especially the 60s, the sexual revolution of
Yes.
the 60s when it really mounted, and so was there some kind of pressure
This
that
was the
put
climax.
on the government
Right.
to really make this legal, because now the doors have just been wide open with the 60s.
Right.
And so you have a lot of women that are pregnant and they want a way out
Right.
quickly.
Right, absolutely. And what we see now is that, you know, in America, we have over 1 million abortions that are performed every year, which breaks down to roughly maybe one every 30 seconds. It's absolutely phenomenal, the rate of abortion now that we see in our own country. And so it is really fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. It came on the tail
heels.
end of the sexual revolution, because we see where we are, and people think, oh, abortion's only legal through the first trimester, or that many aren't actually being performed. But actually, a phenomenal number of abortions are taking place in our country. And it's really quite remarkable to understand how we got here, the mindsets
And
that
it's
were
not
in play.
just in our country, too. Like we've read from the stats from, how do you say it, the Alan Gutenmacher Institute, which is the research wing of Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
I believe they quote the World Health Organization saying that the numbers are getting closer to 45 million
Worldwide.
per year worldwide.
That's right.
Right, so we're talking about a big issue, and I do think it's very significant when you just look at history and deal with the abortion issue today, that we look at the 60s and
Yes.
the rise of just free sex, and then women getting pregnant.
Yes.
And then that was connected to the 70s and
That's right.
the Roe versus Wade decision in 73.
That's
Yes.
right. Just as she has said, you know, the climax was these laws being passed. So how did we get there? You know, and as it says, insights from history. As you understand history, you can see why it would develop into the explosion of the sexual revolution that we did have in the 60s.
Yes.
But earlier in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, many felt like our country was going through a crisis because there were huge numbers of immigrants coming here, and the streets were filling up, the buildings were filling up, and people were very afraid of overpopulation. And there were legitimate concerns. There was one lady that was very active in the early 1900s, Margaret Sanger, that we referred to, and actually she was brought up in a family where the mother had had 11 children. She had had 7 miscarriages, exhausted, and Margaret grew up seeing this. In fact, even
She saw her moms and all.
and the consequences of just one
the
child
difficulty
after
of
another.
raising all these kids.
Exactly. And in fact, even after she had left the home, her father called her back to help with the children because her mother by that time was ill. You know, she had worn herself out. So that made a huge
wow,
impact.
I can imagine. We only have 2. I can't
That's
imagine
right.
having
So
5
Margaret,
or 6 or 10.
That's right. She was impacted by that personally in her own home. But then later in her life, when she became a nurse, she worked in the slums of New York. And she saw a very legitimate concern. There were children being born every year or year and a half. Their mothers were exhausted. They weren't being properly taken care of. They would end up in the streets. You know, she saw, she just saw the deterioration of women and children, family. She had a real burden for that. The thing is, it was her approach on it. You know, the best explain it would be to read a few of her thoughts.
I mean, I can imagine if a family is organized and the father is responsible, that, you know, there are families that have a dozen kids. And
Exactly.
they put all the kids to work, and they all, you know,
Exactly.
under God's blessing and leadership, it works
So
out
it's-
great.
what you
But
see
in other
is-
situations, it's very difficult.
That's good, because it's not so much the size of the family, it's who is being responsible within that family. And that's a big key. But these were some of the things she believed. She believed that marriage laws did away with the freedom of woman by enforcing upon her a continuous sexual slavery and a compulsory motherhood. Now, these are the roots of a sexual revolution, a storm brewing.
Yes.
This is how she saw it. Another quote that I really want to share because it helps you understand how we got to the point of the sexual revolution. The creators of overpopulation are the women, producing the multitudes who will bring about the next tragedy of civilization. She saw this as, you know, a huge crisis. This one is my last quote. The most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it.
That's what Margaret Sanger said.
This was her solution to this crisis that was brewing in the early 1900s.
And what's fascinating is that her rallying cry became no gods, no masters. The mindset that really took root in the sexual revolution was that women were looking for equality. They were looking to be equal with men, finally. But it took on this mindset of no gods, no masters. We are our own masters. We want free sex, we want free love, and it would lead them to make horrible, very regrettable decisions in regard to the unborn.
Mm-hmm. And so you have this mindset, this thinking, and then there was another woman. She was older than Margaret Sanger. She died in 2015.
1915.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Sure. I
Glad
know who
you
you're
caught
talking
that.
about. So
1950. And it was Ellen White, who was a godly woman, and she had a lot of godly counsel for young ladies.
I think
And
she's the most prolific female writer in history.
well, I love her writings, so I can see why. But she confirmed the same problem. She saw it before even Margaret saw it. There was a problem of women having children, and women, their health not being taken care of. She even urges the husbands to take care of your wives, and she even talked about the sexual use that men would use with no restraint of their women and their wives. So she really identified, she would talk about the children, that weren't being properly taken care of would become destitute and, products that society would have to take care of or someone else would have to take the burden. So she really came down hard on the very same problem. The thing with her is that she didn't have the mindset of Margaret Sanger. Her mindset was no master but God.
Amen.
So it was to the Lord where she got her strength, and it was really wonderful, her viewpoint on womanhood, because she wanted the women to rise to the level that the Lord had intended for them. It wasn't a matter of trying to take the man's role. Explore and rise to the power that the Lord has given you as a woman, the influence that you can have not just on your family, but on the community. So she was very, very encouraging as far as what women can do for themselves and become without constantly trying to feel like they've got to be a man.
Right. And when you read her writings, she very strongly valued not only mothers and fathers and children, but the prenatal influences on the
Absolutely.
developing child.
Yeah.
I've read some of those statements, and they're very,
Well,
very strong.
That ties in with, taking care of the woman. Don't have child after child. Keep her health. Because of that baby, when you get pregnant with that baby, you want to be healthy and you want to be able to not be so burdened with so many other children that you can't take care of yourself while
Right.
that...
Now, we've talked a little bit about the parallels between ancient days, what happened in Israel in the Old Testament, and modern days, what's
Yeah.
happening when we look at the big picture. Let's explore that a little bit. Do you want to?
Sure. What's really unfortunate in this comparison is that as a culture, as a society, we didn't really embrace the views of Ellen White. We really did embrace the views of Margaret Sanger. And we see that as a culture, we have, for women, that freedom is found through sex. If you look at our entertainment, if you look at what we exalt and what we glorify, freedom has been found through sex and sexual exploration. It hasn't been found as a man would find freedom typically in conquering or in overcoming or achieving in some way. And so for women, their identity has been tied very closely to sexual expression and sexual quote-unquote liberation. We see that with pornography, the explosion of pornography, that it truly does degrade women because it is so very much about the self. The woman is there simply for the gratification of the man. And what has happened is in claiming my body, my choice, I have the right to have sex in this way. I have the right to have sex the way men have sex, no strings, no responsibility. It's literally led to the degradation of women as a gender. A man can, as we stated before, he can have sex with a woman, she can become pregnant, and he can utterly reject her and just walk away. And what's amazing is that we are calling this freedom. It's absolutely phenomenal. The second part to this is the idea of equality. A woman says, I'm equal to men, I can have sex in the same way that men do, because again, with that ability to walk away, I was watching a sort of documentary recently called Irreplaceable, and there was a speaker on there who made the most incredible point about the fact that when women decided we are equal to men, we need the same rights as men, and for good reasons, because women were being oppressed, they were being mistreated, but in trying to grasp and attain that equality, they said, we are going to become like men, and we are going to get rid of what makes us different. True equality, it's based on everyone being accepted as they are. We're all different. We're not carbon copies of each other, but we are all equal. What women did in the sexual revolution is they said, we are going to kill off what makes us different. What made them different? They could become pregnant. They could have children. And so instead of demanding that they were accepted despite their differences, they said, we will get rid of and kill off our differences to be equal.
And now we're at a point where 45 million babies around the world are being aborted. I mean, so this is where we come to, which is just, it's horrific. And I want to kind of turn into the spiritual direction. There's a verse that I have in front of me from Revelation chapter 12 that says, verse 12 says, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. For the devil has come down to you having great wrath, because he knows he has a short time. And there's another verse in John where Jesus talks about what the devil's really all about. John 10:10, the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. And I just can't help but think that in the light of the big picture, the cosmic controversy between God and the devil, and if you look at the history of all of this and now the magnitude of what's happening, I just can't help but think that from God's perspective, Satan is really, he's doing a number on us. He's doing a number on humanity. He's attacking women, he's attacking men, he's attacking the home, he's attacking the family,
Yes.
and he's attacking the babies, the little babies that come out and the unborn who haven't come out yet. The whole thing is part of Satan's wrath against humanity to destroy.
Yeah.
And God's goal is to restore, to make women women
Yes.
as they're meant to be, and to find the joy of that, and to make men men as they're meant to be, and so that children will grow up in homes where they're happy. God's plan is being fulfilled. And this is all part of it's got to be part of a cosmic controversy between Jesus Christ and Satan. That's what the Bible reveals to us.
Good and evil.
Yeah, good and evil. That's right. And the battle is intense. I mean, it's so intense. And you just look at like you said, the sexual revolution. And I know that we don't really have a lot of time to go into this, but if you look at the Old Testament, one of the things that the devil got the Israelites into was even sacrificing their children. I mean, I've just done some reading on this, and in Deuteronomy 12:31, they were burning their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. In Ezekiel 16, verse 21, God said, you've slain my children. And in Leviticus 20, verse 4, he tells the Israelites, don't hide your eyes from this. Yes. And we certainly don't want to say that every woman that is in crisis, that is struggling as you were struggling, right, is therefore consciously offering her child as a sacrifice to an Old Testament God. Right. We certainly don't want to say that, because Jesus loves us all.
Absolutely.
But I just can't help but think that there's a parallel between what the devil did in ancient times with Israel and then what's happening now all around the world. I mean, it's such a horrible thing. And it also reminds me of a verse in Genesis where after Cain killed Abel, that God said, "Where's your brother?" to Cain. "Where's your brother? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground." And God must weep. He just must weep. You know, he weeps over the women, he weeps over the men, he weeps over the babies, he weeps over all of this history. And I just can't wait until sin is gone and all of this is over forever, and we'll be with Jesus in a happy place forever.
That's right. As you go down the list, everything valuable to God, the devil is trying to destroy.
Yes.
One way or the other.
And he's undermining God's original plan.
That's right.
The original plan for the nobility of a woman and the nobility
Yes.
of a man and the
Dignity.
happiness of having children. And it's just, you know, the devil is, I'm looking forward to him being gone forever.
Yes.
Me too.
I really am.
Me too.
Well, we're down at the end of this segment. I'd like to again read the Bible verse in John chapter 10, verse 10, where Jesus said that the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. The devil he's a killer, he's a destroyer, and Jesus is a life giver. And he loves us. He's given life to us. He gives life to the unborn through the miracle of conception and then eventually birth. And God's plan is the best plan. And if we've strayed away from that plan, no matter what we've done, we need to know that the devil is the bad guy and that God is the good guy, if you want to say it that way, and that he loves us. And he only wants life for us. He wants goodness and eternal happiness. So may God help us to follow his plan.
Amen.
It's for our own good.
Steve Wohlberg's latest pocketbook, Hidden Holocaust, is a must-read for anyone contemplating an abortion or who has had one. While Steve shares the biblical position on this controversial subject, he also presents a message of hope and healing. To get your free copy of the pocketbook, Hidden Holocaust, just call the toll-free number on the screen and order your copy today, or write to White Horse Media, P.O. Box 1139, Newport, Washington, 99156.